You don't get sacred buildings, you get sacred people.
And that's a good line. I like that.
And if you're using a building if it's a Volvo sales room and it's getting used for the glory of Jesus, it becomes a sacred building.
Well, welcome back to the Life Explored podcast. And for this episode, we have with us Peter Anderson, and I think you just go by Pete, right? Is that okay? Yeah, Pete. Who's joining us? Pete is the pastor of the City on a Hill Church in Edinburgh. Get it right. And also the founder and the apostolic lead. I can never say that word. Apostolic lead for Go Global, which is an organization which we'll talk about.
Sometimes people find Go Global hard, so they say Glow Global. Go Global. So we're going to tongue twist this to start with.
Yeah. I always struggle with that word. Apostle. I can say apostle, but
apostolic.
Apostolic. That's it. Yeah. There we go. Solved. All right. Been healed. So, Pete, you're originally from Glasgow, right?
Yes.
But you live in Edinburgh now, so you've escaped. Never to go back, right?
So I moved to Edinburgh when I was 21, and do you know, genuinely, I don't know what it's like in England, but in Scotland, if you're in the West Coast, you get wet, and if you move to the East Coast, it's sunny. So there's about 50% more rain in Glasgow than Edinburgh. So I remember moving to Edinburgh when I was 21, and I thought, wow, would you look at that? There's a sun up there. But in Glasgow, it just rained all the time.
In Scotland as well. That's
I know.
Wow,
it's sunny
amazing,
in Scotland, the East Coast.
Yeah, I didn't expect that. It's for me. I think I've lived in different places in England and all over, but the best place weather-wise I found was the South Coast.
Oh yeah.
And you go southwest and you start to feel a little bit like, is this still England? I don't know.
Yeah.
But otherwise for me, I think anywhere else in England is just like kind of rain, and occasionally we get this kind of strange occurrence in the sky. It's like a ball of light.
Oh yeah. We see that sometimes.
So you are married to Angie, who is a primary school teacher. Is that right?
Yeah. She is.
Yeah, and you have two adult children. Becky, who has graduated recently.
Yes, so she's 21. That's my son. My son Michael's 21. Becky's 23.
23, yeah.
Becky has just finished. She did a degree at St Andrews in psychology, and then she did a 1 year. She's just finishing her 1 year PGDE, so she's becoming a teacher.
Excellent.
So she's
following in mum's
following in mum's footsteps.
Yeah.
But she loves working with kids, and
And your son Michael, and he works.
Yeah, so he works.
Business.
Yeah, when he left school, he didn't want to go to university. He just wanted to jump straight into work. And there's a guy in our church started a company that basically leases out electric cars. So my son had done a bit of work experience with him, when he was in high school, and he said, "Listen, Mike, I'm starting this new company. Do you want to join me?" And Michael said, "Count me in." So he started when it was really small, and it's grown. It's grown. It started when I had 6 employees, and it's grown to over 40 employees now. So it's really gone great, and he's loving it. He's learning on the job.
Yeah,
and from Michael, he didn't want to go and sit in lectures. He just wanted to get out there and
that's great
and work. So I love it.
Oh, that's great. I love that when somebody gets an opportunity like that. That's great. So you and Angie, so we mentioned City on a Hill Church. You and Angie, so you started the church in your living room in 1998.
Yeah,
is that right?
Yeah. So I was 21 years old. So I became a Christian when I was 15, and between 15 and 21, I was I trained as an architect. That was my background. I studied at university, did a 4-year degree in architecture. And then there comes a point after your degree is you go and work in practice. And I guess while I was on the surface, I was pursuing a career in architecture. Actually, under the surface, the deepest passion was a passion for the local church and a passion to plant churches. And so the city that was on my heart was Edinburgh. And I kind of shortening all this. There was a lot of confirmations. There was a journey with my mentors, and I took the step to move to Edinburgh when I was 21, and took a job. And a lot happened in when I was 21. I got married, took a job in the architect's firm, moved to a new city, and we started the church in our living room.
It does sort of sometimes happen all in one,
It all
doesn't it? You
happens.
know, kind of
It was a
just
very busy year, 1998. But
Yeah.
you know, when I say kicked off the church, that sounds very dramatic. It wasn't dramatic. It was, for the first year, we had a typical attendance of about 5 people.
Yeah, and on that, it's grown into, over the years, it's grown into a multi-site church.
Yeah.
So now operating in 7 communities, and even like an online presence as well. So, I think you mentioned, and certainly you've mentioned in one of your sermons that or your podcast, I think maybe you discussed it, is where the church reached a point of reached a certain point and it wouldn't grow any further. It was like it reached I don't know whether it was like 90 people or 100 and something, and then there was like you read a book, and it was about sort of churches can only sort of I'm paraphrasing here, but churches could only sort of grow to a certain point of 150 people or something like that, but you found a breakthrough.
Yeah, what had happened was, when you look at growth of a church, it's not just a line. It does this, and then it goes like this, and then it does this, and it goes like this. It's a bit of a roller coaster, to be honest. And these are the bits that are exciting. These are the bits where you're having to learn some things. So the dips, for the people listening to audio, you're not seeing what I'm doing with my hands. Okay. So we'd got to the point, we'd grown. It took us 4 years to get to 30 people. So it's pretty unimpressive. It took us 5 years to get to 50 people. And 2003, I knew the Lord spoke to me and he asked me to do 3 things. First thing was to leave my career in architecture, because I was juggling full-time work and church, and I had to pick a lane. And that was a big moment, because you're leaving financial security into, a very small church and financial insecurity. And that's okay, but that was a choice I made. And then second thing was, he really spoke to me about relocating the church from, we were city centre. I was in my 20s, like attracts like. So it was a bunch of 20-year-olds in the church, city centre, 20-year-olds. And he really spoke to us about moving the church to the north area of the Edinburgh, Leith. You remember the movie Trainspotting? That kind of zone. So moved there. And I didn't really know Leith, but God spoke to me about Leith, and I followed his lead. And he also told me, and I remember really clearly, he said, this summer you're going to get your first building in Edinburgh. And I thought, oh, wow. So he really spoke it into my heart. And so long story short, we buy our first building and we move in there with 50 people. And that year we grew through the 100 mark. And it was good growth. It was people coming to faith or coming back to faith. And we were really growing as people were coming to Christ. And then the next year we grew through the 200 mark, and the next year through the 300 mark. We just hit this. It's like we caught a wave, and we saw a real wave of growth again by people coming to faith and being baptized, or people coming back to faith, backslidden folks coming back. But real growth. But then we'd outgrown the building we'd bought, and so the logical step was, you've succeeded in Leith, get a bigger building in Leith. But as we were praying about this, me and the leadership team, we came to the conclusion that that wasn't the right step. But God was actually calling us to start a second centre on the other side of town. Now I know multi-site church is quite a well-known strategy these days, especially in the States, but more and more so in Europe as well. But we didn't know that. I mean, we didn't know this was a thing. 1 church in 2 locations. What does that even mean? So, but we felt the Lord lead us to do it. So we bought another building, an old cinema on the other side of the city. We became 1 church in 2. Then we launched our 3rd, and then our 4th, and so on. So we're in 7 communities now, and yeah, it's just we've been rolling with it. So yeah, each community has a pastor. Each community has a leadership team, and I kind of oversee them. I go on tour around them, and it's great. Yeah.
Do you think a multi-site church is preferable to this kind of mega church that you see in the States where they've got.
I don't think there's anything. I don't think. I'm really pragmatic when it comes to these things. I think there's no rules. You can have house churches, you can have multi-site churches, you can have mega churches. I know some people have a reaction against mega church. Oh, like big is bad. No, bad is bad, and I've seen bad small as well as bad big. So, and good is good. So I've seen good big and good small. So I think it's really just finding what the Lord's got for you in that location. And I think some people are, like my friend Ian Duthie in Aberdeen. He leads Scotland's biggest AOG church. It's King's Church Aberdeen, and he planted that church. He was working as a doctor. Like up until recently, he was working as a doctor, and he's got nearly 1,000 people in his church. And dude, you did that in your part-time, in your evenings. He was working full-time as a doctor. So, and I think, like in the Old Testament, it says there were commanders of 50s, commanders of hundreds, commanders of thousands. And I think some people in their wiring are just commanders of thousands. And so then if you're a commander of thousands, then build a mega church. And if you're a commander of 50, don't pretend you're a commander of thousands. Be totally secure in your command of 50. Just do lots of 50s. So just be comfortable in your own skin and go with that flow. So I don't think it's either right or wrong. It's just different. And I think it's to do with the gifting of the leadership. And I also think it's to do with what does the area need. So for example, when we sent out a couple to Hong Kong a few years ago from Edinburgh, James came to our church. I remember he first heard me when I was preaching from on top of a wall in Bristol Square to students in Edinburgh, and he came up and heckled me. And then he came to my church, and then I baptized him. He became a small group leader. Anyway, long story short,
That's awesome.
we sent him out to plant a church in Hong Kong, and he now looks after our churches in Hong Kong, Nepal, and the Philippines. But James had a house church model in Hong Kong, because you can't. Well, certainly where James was working and where he was seeing fruit, there wasn't no big venues. So you just go multiple. You just have multiple smaller house churches. So again, super pragmatic. How can the goal is how do we make disciples? How do we make disciples in this context most effectively? And so
that is
an
an interesting.
having a cookie cutter
That's
approach.
a very interesting and good take, because as you say, a lot of people sort of come down either on different sides again, when it comes to mega churches and church planting, I guess. But you have more of a pragmatic approach where you're just like, well, as long as it works, right? As long as it's, focused on discipleship and
and I think some people react against mega church because they think it's like a consumeristic type of church where you've got lots of spectators and it's a show.
It certainly seems that way. I mean, I've been to some churches that feel a bit like
And
concerts.
it feels like that. But having said that, I know there are many what people would classify as mega churches where it's totally not like that, where it's a discipleship mobilizing movement. And so I'm really careful not to react against form. In my mind, culture is primary, form is secondary, and the form just is there to facilitate.
Well, cool. Okay, and then I think the third big thing that you are a part of is the unity movement in Scotland. Which you mentioned briefly before we started, and that seems to be primarily focused on prayer.
Yeah, do you know? Whereas my first ever sermon I preached was when I was 17, and it was an event that I was asked to speak at, and I had free rein to choose whatever to preach from. And what the Lord was really speaking to me about, I remember in those weeks, was unity. And so I preached from Psalm 133. The psalm that starts in verse 1, behold how good and pleasant it is for brothers and sisters to dwell together in unity. And then in verse 3 it says, for there the Lord commanded blessing of life forevermore. So I always think back on that and think, wow, look at that. That was the first sermon I ever preached. And here we are years later, and I'm overseeing a unity movement in Scotland. So the way that all started is in 2018, me and 3 or 4 other pastors in Edinburgh. There was a Elam pastor, a New Frontiers pastor, and a couple of others, and myself. And we decided, do you know what, even if no one else joins us, do we believe that if we met weekly and prayed for our region that something would shift? Do we believe that would actually have a difference? And we agreed, yeah, totally would. Do we believe that unity makes a difference, that persistent prayer makes a difference? And we agreed, yes, it would. So we made the call. 2018, even if no one else joins us, we're going to start. And so 2018, we started just with a small group of us. But then slowly we added 1 or 2 people to it. And it grew and grew to the point where I think on the group, there's about 150 from our region in that group. Most weeks you wouldn't get that. Most weeks you get between 30 and 40 people praying. But every week since 2018, we've been praying. And it's not ecumenicalism, which is like lower the bar type unity. No, it's evangelical unity. So we've raised the bar.
Right.
What we said is,
Okay.
in other words, liberals won't be there. There's no unity with the liberals. If guys denying the resurrection, I can't pray with them. Mate, you're a nice guy. I'll be friendly with you, but there is no unity spiritually speaking. So we've got to believe in. So the 3 things is we believe in the authority of Scripture, the divinity of Jesus, and the gospel. And if you believe in those things, now do you know what? There might be different views on baptism. So you get some Presbyterians in the room. There's different views on the charismatic. I don't think people would be anti-charismatic, but they wouldn't certainly be swinging from the chandeliers charismatic. You'd get a bit more guys from FIEC churches, Reformed Baptist churches, but we're all in the room and we're praying with passion. So it's not ecumenicalism, it's evangelical unity. And it's been sustained since 2018. But what's happened, Wes, is since us getting that going in Edinburgh, then in other cities, they've been looking on and seeing this happening. And they're thinking, we want to do that. And a lot of pastors shy away from unity movements because what can often happen is unity movements evolve into let's do tons of events together.
Yeah, committees and
events. And the problem happens, especially with the bigger churches. They think, man, we don't have the headspace for more events. We've already got crazy busy programs already. So what happens is the churches start withdrawing from it. So we've said, listen, it's not about events. Now, occasionally we'll do an event together, but it's not about events. It's about praying consistently. So it's the easy win because no evangelical leader I know would disagree. Like if we pray consistently for the kingdom of God to come every week in unity among evangelical leaders, who could disagree with that? So it's an easy win, and we don't make it hard for people by saying, all right, well, we'll do all these events and we expect all these extra things. No, we keep it simple. And as a result, it's grown arms and legs around the nation, and once a year we bring all the pastors and leaders from around the nation together to pray. So we have 2 days of prayer and fasting. We've hired a higher central location. This year we had 300 pastors from every denomination was there, and the heads of denominations were there, and we were praying and fasting for 2 days for our nation. And do you know, Wes, it's changing the atmosphere. It feels like the atmosphere has shifted. There is across the board growth happening in churches, which I've never seen before in all my days in Scotland. And it feels like this is a contributing factor to that, the prayer movement. So,
do you see that spreading across the rest of the nation, or do you keep the English out as well?
That wouldn't be unity if I kept the English out. So every year in January, my friend Terry Virgo invites me down to an event in London, and Terry has seen what we're doing. Terry he's the original founder of New Frontiers, and he sees what's happening with the prayer events in Scotland, and at that event, there's maybe 20 kind of folks in that room, and there'll be people from the Anglican background. You get people like Dave Smith from Kingsgate and Stuart Bell and various other people, kind of national leaders. And Terry's there saying, you got to hear what's happening in Scotland. So he's kind of prodding and provoking and trying to get everyone else stirred up. But actually, it really is causing I think it's having a really good provocation. So Stuart Bell at ground level has asked me to come and speak to a whole gathering of leaders in Lincoln next year about the unity movement in Scotland. So the whole idea is that, not that I don't need to be involved in it, but if what we're doing could somehow provoke unity to spread,
it sounds very
big win.
Positive, and it sounds really good. And also, I like the idea that it isn't focusing on trying to create this big sort of lots of events and things.
Events take a lot of organising, and there's a place for it. There really is. But I think we wanted to keep the win a lot more simple than that. So we pray, we call on God. Anytime there's a move of God in any land, it's been preceded by consistent prayer. The churches are, my church, we're passionate about evangelism. We want to become outward looking. We want believers to share their faith. We want gospel initiatives to happen, churches to do outreaches, alpha courses. There's no one model that works, but the principle is get the gospel out.
So continuing on, sort of introduction to the view, you have also authored a book recently, Foundations.
Yeah.
And that sort of teaches membership for churches.
Yeah.
And I believe you also use it for, membership in City on a Hill as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how long did that how did that come about, and how long did it take to write?
Well, 2021, Go Global came into existence. Go Global is this family of churches.
Yeah.
So it's churches in various places all over the world. And
Is it 17?
17 countries, yeah.
17 countries and hundreds of churches within those countries as well, right?
Yeah.
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 Carry on.
So it's hard to tell how many churches, but there's maybe 1,200, could be more. There's our heart. If you've got a family of churches, we want to have a theological consistency in the churches. So my heart in writing the book was, okay, we need a membership course, so that it's like a building block. So for a City on a Hill, for example, we run a membership course on a consistent basis. And what happens is when people come in to the church, they like the church, they like the worship, they like the preaching, and they get a good welcome. Okay, so do you want to join the church? And then they go through a membership course. And at the end of the membership course, they've gone deeper in some truths. For example, the authority of Scripture, baptism with the Holy Spirit, understanding of God's vision for the church, those sorts of things. They've gone a bit deeper. And at the end of it, you say, so is this the church you want to be part of? And it's gone from being, I like the worship, cool preaching, nice welcome, to, I believe in this, and I believe in this. It's gone to like kind of really deep convictions. So the membership course, that's the whole idea. It helps people go from being crowd to being core. And so, and the heart is, because we've multiplied these churches in the Go Global family, we figured that we need a membership course so that across the churches, wherever you cut us, we bleed the same. It's almost like the same theological DNA, word and spirit theology across the churches. And that's what Foundations is. So, yeah.
And that book, presumably, maybe any pastor who, leader of a church is maybe thinking about, how can I start a membership course? They could purchase your book and...
For sure. Yeah. It's on Amazon, Foundations by Peter Anderson. Yeah.
As well as all of that, you are a co-host of the Brian and Pete podcast.
Yes.
With Brian Ingraham.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I say his name right?
Yeah, Brian Ingraham.
Yeah. So, and that's also been going for, that's recent as well.
Yes, it's a new initiative. It's been a lot of fun. So me and Brian have been good friends. Brian leads a church in Glasgow, and not part of Go Global. We're just two different churches, two different parts of Scotland, and we're good mates. And we've known each other for many years. And Brian, he's from America, and he started the church in Glasgow a number of years ago. And Rehope, it's one of the good ones. There's some cracking churches over in Glasgow, and Rehope would be one of those great. I mean, they're really growing, really seeing a lot of people coming to faith, baptizing so many people, really, really growing. Anyway, so Brian contacted me at the end of last year and said, Pete, I've been doing a podcast, and it's just been myself. I've been talking to myself. And I said, you need a Wes, right? So he said, Pete, would you be up for doing a podcast with me? And I thought about it. I said, okay, let's do it. And so he said, how about we call it the Brian and Pete podcast? I said, sounds good to me. So every Monday, we set up and we talk. And so each week we have a different theme. And it's been, it's been a real, very similar kind of format to this. It's good because you tackle a different topic each time. Sometimes we've tackled things like discouragement or spiritual warfare, or missions, or GPT. Yeah, so we're covering kind of range of from theological to really practical themes, and I think people are finding it helpful.
Well, I definitely want to, come back to those, because I definitely want to discuss the podcast and maybe some of those themes you just mentioned. But I do want to get through a bit more of.
We're still in the intro, aren't we?
We're still in the intro, yeah. It's really good talking to you, but I think I just want to get through a bit more of that intro, because there is more to it, and I think so as part of Go Global, I mean, you've mentored and equipped leaders around and planted churches around across the UK, Europe, Africa, and Asia as well. And you mentioned about buildings earlier, about getting a church building, because haven't you recently, City on the Hill have recently acquired a new building?
Yes, so we're
2024.
Well, it's kind of we're almost there. So the deal's been agreed. So we're buying a former Church of Scotland building for one of our 7 communities. So it's going to be great. Yeah. So we're using it just now. We're currently renting it. We're currently using it as one of our venues. But the deal's been agreed, and kind of like any day now, really, the lawyers are writing things up, and any day now it's going to go through. So yeah, we're super excited. And there's quite a lot of churches. So sadly, the Church of Scotland has been on the demise. It's been dropping in numbers over the years, and it means that a lot of the Presbyterian churches are becoming available for sale, and which is sad. And some churches in Scotland are doing great, but some aren't, unfortunately. And these buildings becoming available. But what's great is we're seeing, in many cases, churches buying these buildings that the denomination is selling. So many of my friends from the Redeemed churches are buying buildings. Other New Frontiers and different church plants are in the process of buying buildings. So it's great to see buildings getting repurposed, but not repurposed actually, getting back on purpose, built for God's glory and now being reused again for God's glory.
But you also see. I mean, I think it's quite encouraging, because although you'll see sometimes churches having to sell older buildings, and don't get me wrong, there's some really nice and beautiful buildings, but you're also seeing churches moving in and buying up things, other buildings.
Yes, true. Yeah.
I mean, the church here where we are now is New Life. Yeah. It was a car sales room, So they've purchased that, and I know there's other churches I know of in Rugby and around that they're having to leave their old building because they've just outgrown it.
Yeah.
And so now they're going and buying buildings in town centres which are bigger, or more, have the right facilities for them.
Yeah, it's great.
So
you don't get sacred buildings; you get sacred people.
And that's a good line. I like that.
And if you're using a building if it's a Volvo sales room and it's getting used for the glory of Jesus, it becomes a sacred building.
You don't get sacred buildings; you get sacred people. Look, that's a really good line. That's a really good line. But yeah, exactly. And I think, do you think it's that? Do you think? I mean, that some of these buildings, these older buildings, maybe they're just being sold because they're too small, or they're just not practical enough for the congregation. Particularly, it's probably a controversial topic, but cars, right? The Sunday morning, and if there's like very minimal parking in some of these places, and
well, in Scotland they've been closing buildings because the church has been dying.
Yeah, really. Yeah,
absolutely. No, there's been. In Scotland, Peter Brierley did a research project, and he published it in 2016. So it's about 10 years old now. But it was running from 2002 to 2016, and between 2002 and 2016, every month in Scotland, 10 churches were closing every month for all those years, since 2002 to 2016. So that's 14 years. Every month, 10 churches were closing. Now, Scotland's not a huge nation, so the hemorrhaging from the mainstream denominations has been huge. So, and again, my observation is, in the middle of the nation, there has also been church growth happening, and it's almost like there's a downward turn of the denominations, but there's been also a growth at the same time. And I think we're seeing a crossing over now. So I think we're seeing I would guess we're seeing overall growth in the churches now, but for years it hasn't been that. For years it's been a decline. And my observation is it's not, it's been liberalism that kills the church. When people are, they're calling themselves Christians but not really believing the Bible, or they're not.
More of a lifestyle sort of.
It's kind of lifestyle Christianity. It's not, do they really believe in the resurrection and the virgin birth and the gospel? It becomes like almost like a social club, a social gospel. So that's killed churches. Liberalism kills churches. But what we've seen is that across the church movements in Scotland, that wherever churches have said, no, we're going to hold to the Bible. Some people think, oh, you got to get a drum kit and do it cool, then your church will grow. Yeah, maybe, but sometimes not. Some of the fastest growing churches in Scotland have been the free church, which is like really old school. Like they sometimes sing a cappella, no drum kit there. Okay, no flashing lights, no drum kit, a cappella singing the Psalms, and they're growing with young men. Unbelievable.
But there's something about that, I think, which is kind of, I often find there's something raw about that, maybe. Raw and kind of just honest and sort of feeling like, you're stripping back all the layers and just kind of a bit like Jamie Oliver cooking, like just sort of like, here's your basic ingredients. And there's something about that which might feel fresh and different from
100%.
The world and the lifestyle. I want to pivot off that, actually. Not quite prepared, but I want to pivot off that to get your thoughts on like the current talk about revival. Because there is a talk about revival online. I haven't done a lot of research into it, to be honest. I just heard about it. But my sort of thoughts on it, sort of perhaps skeptical thoughts, is it feels like much of a cultural response to some things happening, things that are happening politically rather than a true revival. But I might be wrong about that. Because you see a lot of, by way of example, you're seeing a lot of celebrities come out and talk about Christianity. But they talk about it in terms of, a cultural Christianity. So one of the most famous examples is Richard Dawkins.
He's a Christian
who is a cultural Christian, is what he did call himself recently. So, do you feel, as we said, there is growth of a lot of young people coming into the church, but also do you feel that there might be some of this might be a little bit artificial? I mean, or do you feel?
I'm trying to get the statistics. Let me bring up some of the stats that were that are being reported. Okay, here we go. So this is an article, and they're calling it the Quiet Revival.
Yes, right. Yes, I've heard this.
So it's showing that there's over 2 million more people in attendance at church in the UK since 2018. 2 million more people in church than there was in 2018. Okay, that's good. Gen Z in particular, that's people born after 2001, have quadrupled from 4% to 16% since that same time period. And last year, Bible sales jumped 87% in the UK. Okay, so hey, win, right? That's great. Okay, so and what that's the headlines. But before I saw any of those articles, I mentioned that we've been seeing a real shift in Scotland, and I link it to the praying. We had a national Zoom moment where we actually had a Zoom meeting with pastors from all across the nation on Zoom, and I was hearing rumours of growth, and I just said on the call, guys and girls, do me a favour on the chat. If you're seeing the Lord do something in your church, would you just pop it down in the chat? And all of a sudden, this casket, and you can download the script from our chat. It was stunning.
Wow.
I put it out on social media. It was stunning. Maybe 70 responses. So Arran Baptist Church, Arran's a little island off the west coast. Arran Baptist Church, outgrown their building, have to move into a new building. Pitlochry Baptist Church has a quarter of their school in their youth group now, and they're constantly baptizing people. You've got a free church in Morningside that grew by from 60 to 90 in the last 12 months. Churches reporting baptisms all over the place. And baptisms by churches that wouldn't usually do baptisms. Like churches that would usually baptize babies are baptizing adults because people are coming to the faith as adults. So we are seeing, in Scotland, we are seeing an across the board, and it's not any one denomination or any one movement or any one church that's got a monopoly on it. It's not like that one church is doing great and a few others are doing. So for example, my friend James Glass, he's the head of Elam in Scotland. And I was asking James, what are you seeing in Elam? And he was saying, Pete, it used to be that you'd have, a few typical suspect churches, they would be growing. But he said, right now, it's not like that. He said, it's the churches, it's across the board. It's across the board. So we're seeing across the board growth. Small churches are growing, mid-sized churches are growing, contemporary churches are growing, traditional churches are growing. What they all have in common is they're evangelical. They're holding to the Bible, preaching the gospel, and there's growth. Now, I think quiet revival is a good word to use. I don't think it's a full-blown revival. I think there's a new awareness in the land about, all right, we need to ask questions about God. That's great. It's not. I don't think it's a revival. I think it's a trickle, and thank God for the trickle. It's not a river, but it's a trickle. But to be honest, Wes, if I could, I mean, it's up to God how this goes, right? But if I could cite how it went, so you have 1904, there was a Welsh revival, and it lasted 2 years, and I rejoice in that. And 100,000 people came to faith in 2 years. Praise the Lord. But why was it only 2 years?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it have been great if it was 2 decades? So for me, the win isn't like we had that moment like the Hebridean revival that there's, Peggy and Christine prayed and God's Spirit was poured out in the Hebrides, and over a 1.5 year period, there was an awareness of God and people came to Christ. Wonderful. But wouldn't it have been great if that had been sustained for 30 years? So in Korea, in the 1990s, David Junggi Cho was the pastor of the biggest church in the world, in Korea. And what's interesting is in Korea, 100 years ago, it was 0% Christian, just over 100 years ago. And in the last century, it went from 0% to 40 to 50% Christian in 1 century. Incredible church growth. And David Junggi Cho, who led the biggest church in Korea, he was interviewed about revival. And he said, in Korea, we have seen a revival that's been sustained and sustained and sustained for decades. And they said, it's the difference between impetus and momentum. If you're in a car and you put your foot in the accelerator, that's you getting up to speed. But then if you flip it into neutral, you won't notice the difference initially. You'll just coast, but ever so slowly, you'll drop, and eventually come to a standstill. And his comment was that often in revival, people have put their foot in the accelerator of prayer, and they get up to speed. And then when something happens, a revival happens, they go into neutral and they start managing the revival. But David Junggi Cho's comment was that in Korea, we just kept our foot in the accelerator. Wow. So, hallelujah for a quiet revival. May it become a louder revival. But actually, what I'm more excited about, it doesn't need to be dramatic. It doesn't need to be like, thousands upon thousands in any one church in any one year. But wouldn't it be great if year on year, for the next several decades, we just saw the dials turned, where, churches are seeing 4% growth and 5% growth and, constant, consistent growth across the board in the evangelical churches. That would change a nation more than a quick flash in the pan, exciting revival. But it's not me to decide. This is up to God. I will rejoice however it comes.
No, it's good. It's good. Yeah, I like the idea of the quiet revival and certainly more sort of an organic growth and movement than just a
And it's it's great. You look at Richard Dawkins. I heard him say that about becoming call himself cultural Christian. That's a bit better than the hostile stance he used to take, right?
Well, it's pretty amazing, isn't it? If you go back 20 years, so two things spring to mind, right? One is I remember our youth leaders, and I remember different people preaching and saying, well, statistics show churches in decline, and by 2020 there'll be no churches left. Do you remember that being said at any point?
Doom and gloom, yeah.
And one, it's like, right, okay, well, that turned out to be a lie, What surprised me about Richard Dawkins was I'd only heard of him sort of textually, and when I first saw a video and interview of him, I thought, gosh, this guy speaks like a church vicar.
Wow.
But I'm from from Midlands, and I'm from a bit of a working class sort of background, so I was sort of like, for me, you know, he was very sort of upper middle class, sort of polite. And I thought, gosh, I always thought of him as somebody who was quite rough and angry but he's quite sort of well spoken and well mannered and not at all intimidating in person, I think.
Yeah.
That's my measure.
Well, John Lennox, who's debated Richard Dawkins,
Yeah.
we had John Lennox in our church a number of years ago, and he was saying to me that in his debate with Richard Dawkins, Richard was angry on stage, and off stage he was too. But he said on his debates with Christopher Hitchens in America, he said he an equally militant atheist.
Yes.
But off camera, very, very friendly. They got on like a house on fire.
Yeah.
But off camera, it was not like that with Richard. There was a hostility.
There was definitely a personal.
I mean, they were the atheists were saying, no, we're gonna take out Christianity. We're not gonna hold back. We're not gonna no niceties.
Yeah.
But what I mean, Justin Brierley in his recent podcast, The Surprising Rebirth of Belief in God. Have you come across that?
I've heard about it.
It's a brilliant podcast.
I haven't listened to it yet.
And he talks about the demise of new atheism, and he talks about how what killed new atheism. And what he said was what killed new atheism was a progressive kind of liberal woke agenda from within,
going beyond, going to.
Yeah,
well, I think that's
so they start debating. You know,
I think that's what Dawkins and a lot of these people have found is like it's like, well, hold on a second. Now they're going into all us, you know.
Yeah, so they had atheists were saying, well, there's you know, is gender a real thing and so on, and Richard Dawkins as a biologist was saying, actually, no, you kind of like it's binary, right? So and so it almost like it had within the atheist side there was this, and Justin Brierley talks about how that actually had a big impact on new atheism. But also, what's been exciting is you see people like Jordan Peterson, who is intelligent and, you know, who is really totally objective. I don't know. I think all human beings have got their subjectivities, but Jordan Peterson he's navigating his way into Christianity. Don't think he's there yet, but as a thinker, and he's looking at what Jesus said, and he's looking at the global impact of Jesus Christ. And he's thinking, do you know what? You really can't deny this stuff. And I think when people like Jordan Peterson and others are speaking up and saying, actually, there's something really credible about Jesus, I think people are paying attention and people are looking again at things that they had put on the shelf. And I think they're looking again because some of the people who are talking about it now are pretty credible people, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I agree. And I've followed Jordan Peterson and got very much into a lot of his stuff. And then I did find sometimes he goes sort of a bit off the reservation.
Don't we all?
You know, so and I think it's important to note with him, you know, I really struggle to kind of place exactly where his faith is, because it seems it's very intellectually based, which is nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But you know, sometimes I feel occasionally might you know, if he's talking about a Bible story or something like that, he's quoting the Bible, he sometimes comes at it from a very
angle.
different angle than a theological angle, maybe, you know. But
do you know what's amazing when you seeing Jordan Peterson talking about Jesus?
Yeah.
There's been a few times where he's wept.
Yes, yeah.
And he's had a dream about Jesus.
Yeah.
So it goes beyond just cognitive and mental.
Well, that's it. There's an emotional aspect.
He's been impacted by it. But also when people have asked him, so what's stopping you just taking that dive? I think he's quite daunted by what it would actually mean to follow Jesus. And I like that. You know, Jesus said, if you're going to build a tower, you want to sit down and count the cost first. And it feels like, to me, Jordan Peterson, he kind of thinks, what would it to actually say, Jesus, be Lord of my life? To jump into that deep end, to take that leap of faith, I think he knows that's revolutionary in your life. And quite right, he's right. So I don't think he's taken that step because he knows that step would
cost.
be everything. And I wish that everyone would realise that. That step is everything. It's either all for Jesus or
Yeah.
Don't say you're going to be a Christian and give them half. Give
I
them.
think I
give them
think
all.
also, I mean, I'll speak for myself, but I'm sure there's other people here, and it's I think also with that, a lot of us maybe jump into this life and say, yeah, all right, give my life to Jesus, make you my Lord, without really fully realizing,
Yeah.
what that actually looks like and what that means, So I think in a sense, it's probably in a sense it's quite amazing for somebody to really really deeply analyze it.
true.
What it reminds me of? It reminds me of C.S. Lewis when he talks about his conversion,
Oh, yeah.
because he is another person who I think he came to faith again by intellectualizing it,
Yeah.
and kind of reasoning, and through reasoning figuring out, well, actually it makes sense.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of us, again, speaking for myself, but I think it's usually just a very emotional decision, and then later you figure out. You figure out the cause.
Well, do you know? I think it's the difference between. I think it's difference between eras, but also it's the difference between how people are wired. They said in modernism, people believe their way into feeling. In postmodernism, people feel their way into believing. So in modernism, people think. So in modernism, it was like, all right, if something's true, you got to be able to prove it by research or in a laboratory. And so in response to that, the Christianity's response was, evidence that demands a verdict, or, Lee Strobel books, or, that type of apologetics where 7 reasons for the resurrection, evidences for the resurrection, evidences for the great flood, that sort of thing. But then in postmodernism, what is truth? Pilate was a
Yeah.
classic postmodernist.
Yeah.
What is truth?
Yeah.
And what's true for you might not be true for me, and all this kind of nonsense.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And so postmodernism is a totally different vibe, and they feel their way into believing. And so actually what that's meant is postmoderns are wide open to, for example, the charismatic and gifts of spirit, so because they feel it.
Yeah.
But tragically also, the postmoderns are also open to things like spiritualism and dark things, which are felt as well.
Yes.
It lacks discernment, and they'll embrace things that feel or they're moved by. So, but I don't just think that's 2 eras. I think that's 2 different types of people. I think people are modernists. Some people are like the C.S. Lewis types, the modernist thinkers, and for them they journey it here before it goes here. But for other people, it's not like an era. For other people, they're just wired here, and that catches up afterwards. So, and that's what I think. If we can do church in a way that's word and spirit,
Yeah.
where we're unpacking the Bible, and we're doing it justice, we're doing good exegesis, we're putting it in context, we're doing a good unpacking the Bible, we're engaging people mentally. We're saying, listen, we want to have an integrity when it comes to this text. We want to truly do our due diligence with it. We want to unpack this with energy, but with integrity. So that appeals to those people. But then at the same time, but we're also believing for the miraculous. And here's some words of knowledge the Lord's given me today, and all that happens as well. See, a word and spirit church, which is, I think it can connect with a whole range of people.
Well, thanks for following along with this episode. Be sure to catch the next part of this interview in the next episode of Life Explored.